I'd like to welcome you to our session today. What brings us here today? Vehicle to grid has been a buzzword in the industry for quite some time. It's often perceived as a future technology, maybe a bit too distant in the future, that'll help us realize our green economy, especially in the space of e-mobility. Now, the view is challenged that it's such a distant future away as we begin to actually deploy first projects at scale, and we can reap the benefits today. My name is Nico. I'm Senior Account Executive at gridX, and I'll be guiding you through today's grid session. Maybe a bit of background to myself. Usually I work with partners to get new business cases up and running and to devise new business models that help our partners scale into new digital energy product areas. So I'm really looking forward to focusing more on vehicle to grid in the future. Let's see how quickly that can happen. So why is vehicle to grid such an important aspect to consider? First off, it's one of its key values is revenue generating energy trading possibilities through energy storage and financial rewards programs. Plus, it adds significant resilience to our grid, both to individual households as backup power, as well as with balancing services to the overall grid. There are other values as well that come with it, such as personal net zero opportunities for individual households. We can improve self-sufficiency, just like we do with home batteries and solar systems already. There's also a larger benefit to society because we can alleviate environmental issues with the aggregation of many batteries from EVs being connected and joining those services. Plus, and that's also an important piece, especially for the adoption of electric mobility in the long run, we can engage in enhanced battery management because vehicle to grid can keep the battery healthy by adding additional cycles to the battery. Now, I think one graph really captures why vehicle to grid has to get to a scaling position, and that's the one we're showing here right now. As you can see, we've got three curves describing multiple scenarios with or without adding intelligence to the scale of electric mobility. The first is an unconstrained charging demand. As you can see, it'll simply skyrocket in the next few years to a point where our grid operators will have a challenge to actually cater to those needs. Plus, somebody will have to bear the cost. Then we've got a second scenario looking at smart charging, so optimizing on site, simply utilizing the intelligence of software to optimize load management. But then, and that's the scenario that is so important to us, and what drives our grid session today is actually the point where vehicle to grid becomes an integral part of supporting the grid, as well as helping to scale e-mobility without adding additional cost, and possibly even adding value with, as what I mentioned initially, things like energy storage and financial rewards programs. So let's dive in. First off, I'd like to introduce you to three main components that have to be considered when talking about vehicle to grid. First is the definition of vehicle to grid itself. We basically offer flexibility to the grid through electric vehicles. How do we do that? vehicle to grid refers basically to a way of marketing network services with bidirectional electric vehicles. The purpose is the reduction of cost or to generate income in front of the meter. Then we have vehicle to home or vehicle to building, two concepts very similar to each other. Here we still have the bidirectional car, but we're not looking at the grid as a recipient of that energy, but we're simply looking at the individual building or home. Here it's about local optimization behind the meter. Again, just like your home battery that you would have in conjunction with your PV system. And then we have a third point we would like to make today, and that is the ISO 15118. It's the path forward to actually make vehicle to grid and vehicle to home happen in the short and long run. Why that is, we'll take a look in a second. So how does vehicle to grid work? Vehicle to grid describes the use of an electric vehicle's stored electricity for discharging into the grid. Use cases for vehicle to grid technology are mostly around grid services. So aggregators can utilize fleets of electric vehicles for balancing purposes on the primary frequency control market, for example, just as they are already doing that with the aggregation of home batteries in virtual power plants. Why is that important? Well, there's multiple reasons. First, grid operators can optimize their investments and stabilize their network, which they have to because they see increasing flexibility demands, both from renewable energy generation and now with an increase of EVs from the demand added by EVs. Secondly, aggregators can add additional revenue streams. That is very important to those either operating in a virtual power plant already or building those. And thirdly, EV manufacturers can sell added value with the vehicles that they offer. And we'll take a look at what the situation there is as we move forward in our grid session today. Not to forget vehicle to home or vehicle to building. Vehicle to home describes the use of an EV's battery for discharging into the local network, such as a house or a commercial building for self-optimization of that building. So essential in that case, as well as in vehicle to grid, though, is bidirectional charging capability, both of the EV and of the charging stations. Because bidirectional charging and vehicle to grid are often used together, I'd like to clarify their relationship. Because technically bidirectional charging refers to two-way charging of batteries, while vehicle to grid looks at the application of that. So possible applications could be around blackout situations. So imagine a case where the grid goes offline and you have an EV with a bidirectional charging capability that you could connect to your house and supply the needs to your house while the grid is offline. That concept has actually been pushed for in Japan quite a bit. We'll take a look later who's operating in the vehicle to grid and bidirectional markets, which will help us understand why Japan is interested in that as well. But that's only one case. On the other hand, we can look at time of use tariff optimization. Again, very similar to home batteries, but then with a larger capacity of a battery to actually store cheap electricity when the prices are low and to discharge them into the building when prices are high. Studies have shown that electric vehicle fleets can actually save billions of euros with controllable load and vehicle to grid features. And it will definitely enable us to optimize the use of renewable energy which is something we're all facing as we move forward. But the benefits differ depending on the stakeholders. So I'd like to just briefly touch upon three different benefits per stakeholder group. So first, power companies, they can utilize time arbitrage by aggregating and marketing the discharging and charging flexibility of bidirectional vehicles. That can be through end consumer contracts with their existing household customers. Imagine the EVs charged when prices are low and discharged when prices are high, but not like a time of use tariff for that customer, but on the electricity market. Secondly, for households, or in this case, more businesses, we'd look at peak shaving as an example. Peak shaving describes the reduction of a peak load at a location by controlled charging and discharging of the bidirectional vehicles. So for that business, we can show that this reduces the operating costs of the site significantly because they reduce their charges, their grid charges. And then thirdly, for grid operators, and that's a very important stakeholder in this whole space, is primary balancing power. As an example, the provision describes balancing power with an aggregated bidirectional EV pool. Here again, we are talking about a pool responding to grid frequency signals, for example, by a TSO. There's quite a significant financial benefit involved for those operating in that space. Plus, it's one of the key components of stabilizing our grid from adding renewable energies. Now, since we talked about vehicle to grid and vehicle to home, and have also introduced ISO 15118 in the beginning. For those not yet fully familiar with it, I'd like to give you a brief introduction. So I mentioned initially that only with ISO 15118 we expect both vehicle to grid and vehicle to home to actually happen. Why is that? Because it's a series of standards that describes the basic communication between an EV and a charge point. And that is important because only through that data transmission and the communication between the EV and the EVCS, we can actually create value-added functions for electromobility users. One of the examples, and that's luckily being rolled out, has been rolled out in the past years, at least in some electric cars, is plug and charge. Plug and charge describes a seamless user experience for customers charging their car at a public charging station, for example. Other examples in the ISO 15118 are advanced energy management software descriptions, as well as vehicle to grid as a concept that should be implemented from 2024 onwards. So we still got a bit to go, but it's coming and happening. So just looking at this from a timeline perspective, the ISO standard has actually been introduced already back in 2013 initially. It's got a recent update a couple of years ago in 2019, from which we now have a clear timeline for both plug and charge, which, as I mentioned just now, is being implemented as we speak, both by hardware manufacturers for charging stations as well as EVs. And now relating to our topic today, as I mentioned before, the standard only defines the vehicle to grid implementation from a time 2024 onwards. So still a couple of years to go, but we can see that companies are gearing up for it, both OEMs for cars as well as charging stations. Yes. Besides the facts that we just have a bit more time before the standard kicks in for vehicle to grid, there are also a few hurdles that we have identified in general that have kept vehicle to grid adoption in the short run. So first off, we actually didn't have standards implemented that have guided OEMs how to design their products so they could speak to each other. That is now being rolled out, so that's a good thing. But we need more OEMs to adopt those standards. Secondly, grid operators, while we have identified them as one of the key stakeholders, they have not been as supportive as they could have been in the past years and in projects that actually look at vehicle to grid concepts. So it is important for us to work together on building that new environment in which vehicle to grid can actually become an integral part. And thirdly, economics obviously is always an issue when you are looking to scale a new type product, a new concept. And one of the things that the industry still has to go through is a reduction of R&D costs and reduced hardware costs, because we're looking at sometimes a 10-fold or even 15-fold price point for a charging station that has bidirectional charging capability versus a regular wall box for your home. So even though you might expect that new technology does cost more, that factor is indeed a hindrance to the broader adoption for both private as well as commercial customers. But we trust that from scaling, we'll get both R&D costs reduced as well as hardware costs reduced. So yeah, that's basically it for our introduction now. Let's take a look at the current status in terms of projects as well as commercialization of vehicle to grid. First off, and I think this is actually a pretty good resource for everyone who wants to dive a bit deeper in individual projects. Check out vehicle2grid-hub.com. They've got a great assortment of data compiled from with a worldwide perspective on what the status is, and actually have reported on individual projects pretty well. So what they've come up with is an overview where we can see that within the last 10 years, or even 12 years now, we've had about 88 projects worldwide. More than 6,000 chargers have been installed for vehicle to grid projects, and 22 countries have actually participated in those. Now, what's the result? And that's part of what we're discussing here today. Is we can still see there's a significant focus on proof of concepts. There has been a significant focus on proof of concepts. So for 12 years, we've been trying to prove the concept of vehicle to grid. I don't want to go through all the individual points, but key here is that only 4%, and that equates to about 4 projects, have been commercially secured. So while we're working on the scaling of the concept, only 4 projects have actually reached commercial maturity. So that's interesting. And we really hope that we can change this. But I can already tell you, we trust we will. Let's take another look at who's participating in those projects. For those of you who have been looking at vehicle to grid for a while, will know that the Nissan Leaf is one of the most popular EVs that with a bidirectional charging capability. And we also understand why that is. And I mentioned that in the beginning, is because Japan has been prone to natural disasters such as earthquakes. The search for a backup power solution that can be abundantly made available has been found. Basically, an electric car, if scaled to the whole population, will be a solution to blackouts in crisis situations. So manufacturers such as Nissan, coming from Japan, would obviously look for such a opportunity. Mitsubishi with a plug-in hybrid EV, the Outlander, has been participating in quite a few projects, as well as Renault Honda. Question that I would like to raise is, where are our European manufacturers here? Because Nissan really stands out, Mitsubishi on second place. And one of the things is we don't have bidirectional charging capabilities yet in the series EVs that our German or European manufacturers are producing. So we've got a bit of a way to go here. Another interesting point is who of the EV charging of the charging station manufacturers is actually in the space. Interestingly enough, and I was curious, Magnum Cap, I haven't heard of them yet, but I looked them up. So they have been key to some of the projects because they actually entered the bidirectional charging market in 2013. That is 1 year before the Nissan Leaf was actually launched. So this company from Portugal has a significant head start through their early market entry, which I find curious. And as you can see, they've made their mark in getting projects on the road for vehicle to grid. A bit more disappointing is the look at participants from the DSO and TSO realm. From 88 projects, only a fraction have been joined by grid operators. And I've been wondering why that is. Maybe somebody of you has an idea. I can just guess. It could be around a lack of regulation that actually helps them guide their activities, because we know energy space is usually heavily regulated. So traditionally, if you don't have to do something, you might not go there. On the other hand, it could be that getting additional assets on the balancing markets might be a hurdle. Internally, there are administrative challenges to actually getting new assets accepted that can join on the balancing market. So there might be a number of reasons. Now, talking about projects, one slide, I mentioned that about 4 of 88 projects in the past 12 years have been commercialized. One very recent example, and I'm pretty happy to report on that, is the largest industrial scale vehicle to grid tender that has yet been put out. Here, ENGIE, together with Fiat Chrysler, have actually won a tender to supply 25 megawatts of output via a vehicle to grid system. The project's situated in Turin, in Italy, in the logistics center of Fiat Chrysler. While they start with 64 charging stations, they will eventually scale to 700 charging stations to which cars can be connected. And I think that is amazing. And we can really see from such a project that is commercially driven that the concept is viable, it makes financial sense, and we're getting to the tipping point, which is really exciting. Plus, and we are yet to see how this is going to play out eventually. It's not only a benefit for Fiat Chrysler and ENGIE, but end users who will connect their car at the site will actually receive either financial compensation or free energy in return for the buffer service. So that again really shows how the individual stakeholders can benefit from these concepts being rolled out. Since the gridSession is by gridX, I don't want to miss out on giving a bit of insight into what we can do for vehicle-to-grid and what we are already doing. So for those of you who have been following us, understand that we are in quite a number of use case domains, operating from private households to commercial sites, fleet management for EV charging stations, up to multi-cascaded smart district energy management. So we cover a good range of use cases in the digital energy space. Vehicle-to-grid is something we consider a significant part of our future activities as well. Why? Well, first off, we're really great at local real-time control. So we can implement advanced energy management algorithms for the local optimization, both at private households as well as commercial sites. For aggregators, it's about fleet management as well as remote location management. Think of reduced service costs, improved flexibility. And then it's all about data analytics, obviously, for an organization such as gridX, in terms of forecasting, where we can support the business model by helping scale. And that is one of our key focus areas with our existing partners, is always look for new use cases and a way to advance on the platform concept that we have introduced with our partner. So how does it look like in real life? So we've got an ongoing project together with E.ON in the space of vehicle to home. We started out with a 6-person household that has a 5.6 kilowatt peak PV system installed, 3 batteries of about 9 kilowatt hours each, stationary, and a Nissan Leaf that gets used for supplying the household as well. Now, and this is really exciting. This is really exciting because this project has been running for more than a year, so we can actually go through a whole season of data, and we have had the amazing result of 97% autonomy from the grid over a period of 12 months for this household, where I believe it's only 2.5% or something of the overall energy consumption has been taken from the grid. What's the conclusion for us here? Well, we can say electric vehicles will play a key role in the decarbonization of mobility. Plus, they play a key role in the personal CO2 balance sheet of end users. Coming to the end of our gridSession today, what are we taking away? So the question that we raised, or the idea that we raised, is that we want to move from buzzword to business case. So where are we at? We understand we need more choice for customers, both from an EV perspective as well as a charge point perspective. We require more support from industry participants, especially grid operators, because they play an integral part of both the execution, but as well as the definition of how these solutions will look like eventually. On the upside, though, we can see that commercialization has begun. One of the examples was the energy project I mentioned before, and the fourth one is we can see that EV manufacturers are slowly adapting as new EVs are coming to the market. So that's it for today. I'm gonna check out what questions are left. If there are none, we might just catch you in the next grid session. Yes, Jennifer, indeed, the car is being used for driving. The calculation basically that underlines this is that the car is sitting idle for about 23 hours a day on average. Obviously, there are days where you use the car more often, but as we have data for the whole year, that is what we had as a result. And yes, the car is being used for driving. All right. So, how far do you think the cost of the bidirectional charger will come down in the future as compared to the unidirectional charger? My estimation would be that we'll see a introduction of bidirectional charging capability into the standard of electric vehicle chargers, both for private households as well as for public charging. There's going to be a transition time where we'll see both products being available, because there are still use cases where you don't need a bidirectional charging capability, but eventually these will most likely take over as the primary technical solution. And in terms of cost, that will heavily depend on the scaling of both EVs and the chargers. Because as long as there's only a limited number of cars available, plus only a limited number of chargers available, choice is limited, and consumers need choice to actually help scale the market. So to answer your question, I'd say it'll be on par in the next few years, and then it'll take over as the key technology. Do you consider expanding vehicle-to-grid projects in other countries? Yes, we do. gridX is driven by the collaborations we have with our partners. So if you are considering a business opportunity, irrespective of the geographical location, get in touch and we'll have a chat. We are already operating in some international projects, so we're definitely open. Mm-hmm. Yes, Carlos, we're happy to share that. We're happy to share that with you. Either you get in touch with me directly, and I'm happy to share some more insights, and I think that's what we might do as well, is just share more of that detail about the X House on our website together with the webinar. So that's a curious one, Michael. The impact of bidirectional charging on the vehicle battery. Now, that has been a topic of discussion in the past. The conclusion, though, is, and we can also look at the results of some of the reports that we've seen, is first, you'll use the car anyway for driving. So when you drive, you discharge your battery, so you don't add a new case to the battery. The second, though, is for the vehicle-to-grid use cases, it's usually minutes. So we're not talking about a full discharge and a full charge, both of which are usually not recommended for batteries anyway. So the health of a battery can be sustained by advanced energy management algorithms, and I can tell you that we're working on these type of algorithms as we control multiple DERs. So I think we're coming to an end. Thanks for joining us today at our today's grid session. I hope you took away some new insights, and we're looking forward to continue the conversation offline. For those who want to reach out, I'm looking forward to your contact. All right, talk soon.